It was a normal Tuesday. Not the kind people remember. Not a birthday. Not an anniversary. Not the first day at a new job or the day the sky turned green before a storm. Just a Tuesday. The kind of day that slips past unnoticed. The kind that starts with routine and ends in leftovers. And maybe that's why Rachel Mercer still hated Tuesdays. Because that was the day her husband disappeared. No warning. No fight. No note on the kitchen counter. No mysterious behavior the week before. Just one ordinary morning in Columbus, Ohio, where the air smelled like wet pavement from overnight rain and the neighborhood was already waking up with the familiar rhythm of sprinklers clicking across front lawns. Rachel stood barefoot in the kitchen, still in one of Daniel's old college t-shirts, scraping burnt toast into the sink while the coffee machine hissed in the background. Upstairs, their 6-year-old daughter Emma was arguing with herself about whether she wanted the pink sneakers or the light-up blue ones. Life. Normal life. Messy and loud and comforting. Daniel came downstairs at exactly 7:35, knotting his tie with one hand while balancing his phone and travel mug in the other. He always moved like that, efficient, practiced, like he'd already lived this morning 100 times. "You burned it again," he said, grinning. Rachel shot him a look over her shoulder. "You're welcome." He kissed her temple. That tiny kind of kiss people stop noticing until it's gone. Then he crossed to the stairs and called up, "Emma, school bus in 10. A dramatic groan came from upstairs. Daniel laughed. That laugh would haunt the walls of the house for years. He looked normal. Completely normal. Blue shirt. Gray tie. Silver wedding band. Same watch Rachel bought him on their 10th anniversary. Nothing about him said this would be the last time she'd ever see him walk out that door. At 7:42, he grabbed his keys from the ceramic bowl near the entrance. "Taco Tuesday tonight?" he asked. Rachel smiled. "Only if you don't forget the hot sauce this time." He raised 2 fingers from the keys like a mock salute. "Never again." Those were the last words Daniel Mercer spoke in that house for 3 years. Rachel watched from the window above the sink as he backed his silver Honda Accord down the driveway. He gave his usual little steering wheel wave. Then he turned left at the end of Maple Street. Gone. At first, it meant nothing. People leave for work every day. The terrifying part was how ordinary it all felt. At 8:17, Rachel's phone rang. It was Daniel's office. She almost ignored it because she was wrestling Emma's lunchbox zipper closed. "Hi, this is Rachel." A woman from the office sounded confused. "Hey, did Daniel mention he'd be late today?" Rachel frowned. "Late? No, he left on time." Silence. Then, "That's weird. He's never late." The sentence was small. But it landed hard. Daniel was many things. Quiet. Reserved. Sometimes annoyingly punctual. But late? Never. Rachel told herself it was traffic. A flat tire. Dead battery. Maybe he stopped for gas. By noon, she had texted him 7 times. No reply. By 2 p.m., every call went straight to voicemail. By 4, her chest had that tight, unnatural pressure that only comes when fear stops being an idea and starts becoming real. She picked Emma up from school with a smile she barely held together. "Daddy working late?" Emma asked it casually, swinging her backpack. "Probably," Rachel said. She hated how easy it was to lie when you were scared. At 6:30, taco containers sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Rachel had picked them up herself. Emma kept glancing toward the driveway every time headlights swept past the house. By 9, Rachel called the police. The first officer was calm in the way only people outside your panic can be calm. "Ma'am, adults are allowed to go missing for a little while." Rachel stared at him. "A little while?" He softened. "We'll file the report." That night Rachel didn't sleep. She sat on the couch with every light in the house turned on, waiting for the sound of Daniel's key in the door. It never came. The next morning, they found his car parked in the corner of a Kroger lot 20 miles from downtown. Locked. No signs of forced entry. No blood. No broken glass. Wallet on the driver's seat. Keys in the cup holder. His phone was missing. The detectives called it unusual. Rachel called it impossible. Daniel wouldn't leave his wallet. Wouldn't abandon his car. Wouldn't disappear before reading Emma her favorite dinosaur book. But impossible things had a way of becoming real once police tape got involved. Days turned into weeks. Search dogs tracked his scent to the edge of the parking lot. Then nothing. Security cameras from nearby stores showed his car arriving at 8:02 a.m. But the angle never captured who stepped out. No witnesses. No body. No ransom. No bank withdrawals. No social media activity. No trace. It was like Daniel Mercer had been edited out of the world. The local news picked it up for a few nights. His smiling photo flashed between weather maps and election ads. Missing father of one. Police seek public help. Then newer stories replaced him. A freeway accident. A city council scandal. A winter storm warning. The world moved on. Rachel couldn't. 3 months later, the casseroles stopped. 6 months later, friends stopped asking for updates. A year later, even the detectives sounded tired. But Rachel stayed frozen in the day Daniel left. Every Tuesday, Emma still asked for tacos. At first Rachel cried every time. Then eventually it became ritual. Tacos on Tuesdays. Like a tiny way of refusing to let him disappear completely. Years passed. Emma grew from 6 to 9. Her baby teeth disappeared. Her voice changed. Her questions about Daniel became quieter. Rachel hated that most of all. Grief was one thing. Forgetting was another. Then, exactly 3 years later, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Rachel's phone buzzed while she folded laundry. Unknown number. She almost let it ring out. Something stopped her. Hello. Static. Then breathing. Faint. Shaky. Human. Rachel stood so still she could hear the washing machine spinning in the next room. Daniel? A long silence. Then. The unmistakable sound of a phone unlocking. A soft electronic click she knew by heart. His phone. Her blood went ice cold. The line disconnected. Rachel stared at the screen. A second later, a text came through. No words. Just a location pin. Her hand started shaking before she even opened it. Blackwood Lake. The old Mercer family cabin. Abandoned for years. A place Daniel had once refused to ever visit again after his father died there from a heart attack. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Then she remembered something. The night before he vanished, Daniel had stood in the hallway outside Emma's room, unusually tense. He'd said it so quietly she barely registered it. If anything weird ever happens, stay away from the lake. At the time she laughed. Now, staring at that blinking location pin, she felt something cold crawl up her spine. Because suddenly this wasn't just a disappearance. It was a message. And somewhere out there, after 3 years of silence, Daniel's phone had just turned back on. Rachel didn't call the police. She stared at the blinking location pin for nearly a full minute, her thumb hovering over the screen, heart pounding so hard it made the room feel smaller. Every instinct said she should call 911. Every rational thought screamed that this could be a trap. But grief doesn't make you rational. 3 years of silence had rewired something inside her. Hope no longer felt warm. It felt dangerous. Sharp. Like broken glass wrapped in a gift. And somehow, deep down, she knew this message wasn't random. It was meant for her. Not the police. Not the detectives who had slowly let Daniel's case collect dust. Not the reporters who once shoved microphones in her face asking how it felt to lose a husband. Her. Rachel grabbed her keys so fast they slipped from her hand and clattered across the kitchen tile. The sound snapped Emma's voice into the room. "Mom." Rachel turned. Emma stood in the hallway in her school hoodie, backpack half-zipped, hair still damp from the shower. At 9 years old, she had Daniel's eyes. That same steady, searching look that always made Rachel feel like she was being read from the inside out. Rachel forced a smile she didn't feel. "I need you to stay at Aunt Melissa's after school today, okay?" Emma frowned. "Why?" Rachel hated how quickly kids learn the shape of fear in a parent's voice. "Just, grown-up stuff." Emma stared at her for a second too long. Then came the question Rachel had spent 3 years dreading and somehow never escaped. "Is it about Dad?" The room went still. Rachel's breath caught. She knelt in front of her daughter, smoothing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know yet." It was the most honest thing she could say. Emma's face shifted, not excitement, not exactly, but something close to fragile hope. The kind that hurts to witness. "Will you tell me if you find something?" Rachel swallowed hard. "I promise." She dropped Emma at school, then drove straight to Melissa's office to explain the change in plans. Her sister took one look at Rachel's face and asked no questions. That alone told Rachel how bad she looked. The drive to Blackwood Lake took just under 30 minutes, but every mile felt heavier than the last. The city slowly peeled away behind her. Subdivisions gave way to open stretches of road. Traffic lights turned into long empty intersections. Then the pavement narrowed into 2 cracked lanes lined with dense trees. The kind of woods that always seem darker than they should be. Rain from earlier still clung to the leaves, and every now and then drops hit Rachel's windshield like fingertips. The GPS signal weakened as she got closer. The road to the cabin hadn't changed. That was somehow the worst part. Same broken wooden sign. Same gravel shoulder. Same bend in the road where Daniel once pulled over so Emma could watch deer crossing at dusk. Memory sat in every corner of this place. And now it felt like memory had teeth. By the time Rachel turned onto the dirt path leading to the Mercer cabin, the sun had started sinking low behind the trees. Orange light spilled through the branches, striping the ground in long shadows. The lake appeared first. Blackwood. Still. Wide. Too quiet. The cabin stood on the far edge of the clearing exactly as she remembered it. A-frame roof. Weathered gray boards. The porch Daniel's father built by hand before Rachel ever knew him. But something was wrong. Rachel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The porch light was on. A yellow glow spilled across the steps. She stared at it, frozen. The power had been shut off years ago after Daniel's father died. No one should have been able to turn that light on. A chill moved through her arms. Then she smelled it. Cigarette smoke. Fresh. Not old wood. Not damp air. Fresh smoke drifting through the cracked open window beside the porch. Someone was here. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. Rachel flinched. Another text from Daniel's number. 3 words. Come inside alone. Her mouth went dry. For a second, every survival instinct told her to reverse the car and leave. Call the police. Call anyone. Do anything except step into that house. But then she thought of Daniel's voice on the line. That breathing. That unlocked sound. And before fear could talk her out of it, Rachel opened the car door. The cold air hit her immediately. The clearing was silent except for gravel crunching under her shoes and the distant lap of water against the shore. Every step toward the porch felt unreal. The old wooden boards creaked under her weight, groaning like the house itself remembered her. The front door was slightly open. Rachel stopped just outside it. Her pulse roared in her ears. "Daniel?" she called softly. No answer. She pushed the door open. The smell inside hit her first. Dust. Old books. Lake water. And underneath it all, cigarette smoke strong enough to tell her whoever had been here recently hadn't gone far. The living room was frozen in time. The plaid sofa. The crooked lamp in the corner. The faded family photos on the mantel. But the dust told a different story. Everything was coated in a gray film except for one clear trail of disturbed footprints leading down the hallway. Straight toward Daniel's father's study. Rachel's stomach tightened. She followed the footprints slowly, her hand brushing the wall for balance. The hallway felt narrower than she remembered. At the end, the study door stood half open. A faint blue light pulsed from inside. Phone screen glow. Rachel pushed the door wider. The room was almost completely dark except for the light from a phone sitting face up on the desk. Daniel's phone. Same black case. Same tiny crack spidering across the bottom corner from when Emma dropped it in the driveway years ago. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer. The screen was unlocked. One image filled it. A recent photo. Emma. Walking into school. Last Thursday. Rachel stumbled back so fast her shoulder hit the bookshelf. No. No, no, no. The photo was recent. That meant someone had been watching them. Watching Emma. A wave of panic so intense it almost knocked the air from her lungs swept through her. Then came the voice. Behind her. Low. Rough. Unmistakable. Rachel. Every nerve in her body went electric. She turned so fast the room spun. A man stood in the doorway. Tall. Gaunt. Older than memory. A beard shadowed his jaw, streaked with gray. His face was thinner, sharper. His shoulders carried the weight of years Rachel had lived alone. But it was him. Daniel. Her mind recognized him before logic could catch up. The same eyes. The same scar near his eyebrow from a high school baseball accident. The same way he stood slightly angled when nervous. Rachel couldn't breathe. For one impossible second, she forgot how. Daniel? His face broke at the sound of his name in her voice. I'm sorry, he whispered. 3 years of fear, grief, rage, confusion, and desperate unanswered questions detonated inside her all at once. She crossed the room and shoved him hard in the chest. Where were you? The words tore out of her. Raw. Animal. Broken. Daniel staggered back but didn't defend himself. Tears blurred Rachel's vision. Do you know what you did to us? She cried. To Emma? Her voice cracked on Emma's name. That was the wound that never closed. Daniel looked wrecked. Not guilty. Destroyed. Like whatever answer he carried had been crushing him for years. Rachel hit his chest again, weaker this time, more grief than anger. You missed everything. Daniel's eyes filled. I know. That quiet answer somehow hurt more than any excuse could have. Rachel stepped back, breathing hard, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding her own body together. The lake outside tapped softly against the dock. The old house groaned around them. And standing there in the doorway of his dead father's study, Daniel finally looked up with the face of a man who had spent 3 years trapped inside a nightmare. Rachel, he said, voice trembling, what I'm about to tell you is worse than disappearing. And in that moment, Rachel realized the fear wasn't over. It had only just begun. Rachel stared at him, her back pressed against the study bookshelf, chest heaving so hard it hurt. For 3 years she had imagined this moment in 1,000 different ways. Sometimes Daniel came home injured. Sometimes he came home guilty. Sometimes he never came home at all, and the police found the kind of answer no family ever truly survives. But none of those versions prepared her for the man standing in front of her now. He looked real. Painfully real. Not like a ghost. Not like a dream. Like a husband who had lived through something so dark it had hollowed him out from the inside. The porch light flickered outside, throwing thin bands of yellow through the study window. Daniel looked toward it for a moment, like he was making sure they were still alone. Then he shut the study door. The soft click of the latch sounded final. Rachel's stomach twisted. What is this? She whispered. What happened to you? Daniel dragged a shaking hand down his face. The Tuesday I disappeared, he said, voice rough, I found something at work I was never supposed to see. Rachel didn't speak. She just stared. Daniel had spent 12 years as a senior financial analyst at a respected investment firm in downtown Columbus. The kind of place with glass walls, polished floors, and executives who smiled too much. To everyone else, it looked clean. Successful. Safe. But numbers tell stories people don't. And Daniel had always been good at hearing what the numbers were saying. It started with a transfer report, he said, stepping closer to the desk. One account moved $2 million into another shell account overnight. Then it bounced through 3 more entities and landed offshore. Rachel frowned. Money laundering? Daniel nodded slowly. At first I thought it was a clerical error. But the deeper I looked, the more accounts I found. Fake LLCs, ghost clients. Transactions hidden inside pension funds. Rachel's pulse started rising again. How much money? Daniel gave a bitter, humorless laugh. Enough to ruin lives. He opened a drawer in the desk and pulled out a worn manila folder. Inside were printed statements, transaction logs, names circled in red pen. Evidence. By that Tuesday morning, he said, I had enough to confront my supervisor. Rachel's mouth went dry. She already knew where this was going. Daniel stared down at the folder. I walked into his office at 7:55. Closed the door. Told him the numbers didn't make sense. His eyes darkened. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. The room seemed to get colder. Rachel folded her arms tighter around herself. What did he say? Daniel looked up. He smiled. That word alone sent ice through her. Then Daniel repeated the sentence exactly as it had been burned into his memory. He said, "Daniel, you just made the worst mistake of your life." Rachel felt her breath hitch. Daniel continued. By the time he left the building, he knew something was wrong. A black SUV was parked across the street. Same vehicle he'd noticed in the garage the day before. Same tinted windows. He tried to ignore it. Told himself he was overreacting. Then the SUV followed him. Through 3 lights. 2 turns. All the way toward the grocery store lot where his car was later found. Rachel's hands trembled. What happened there? Daniel looked toward the floor. They boxed me in. The words came out flat. Dead. 2 men got out. Suits. Calm. Like this was business. Rachel felt nauseous. They knew your name, Daniel said softly. And Emma's. Her stomach dropped. No. Daniel swallowed. They knew her school. Your work schedule. They even knew about Taco Tuesdays. Rachel physically flinched. The intimacy of it was worse than violence. This wasn't random. This was surveillance. Planning. Control. One of them handed me a photo, Daniel said. He reached into the folder and slid a worn print across the desk. Rachel picked it up with shaking fingers. It was Emma. 3 years younger. Standing outside her elementary school. Smiling. Rachel's vision blurred instantly. Oh my God. Daniel's voice cracked. They said if I went to the police, both of you would disappear before sunrise. The room tilted. Every cruel theory Rachel had built over 3 years shattered at once. He hadn't left because he wanted freedom. He left because someone had weaponized his family. So what did you do? Rachel whispered. Daniel looked at her, eyes red. I called the FBI. Rachel blinked. He nodded. There had already been an open federal investigation into the laundering ring. They believed the money was tied to organized crime and political bribery. That explained the silence. The total disappearance. The impossibility of tracing him. The agents told me the threat was real, Daniel said. If I stayed visible, they'd use you and Emma to control me. Rachel stared at him, unable to process the scale of it. So they hid you. For 3 years. Witness protection. Safe houses. No phone. No contact. No identity that belonged to him. A living disappearance. Rachel's anger shifted shape. Not gone. But changed. This wasn't betrayal. It was sacrifice so brutal it looked like abandonment. Daniel's face collapsed under the weight of what came next. I watched Emma grow up from surveillance photos. Rachel's breath caught. What? He pointed to the phone on the desk. Every birthday. Every recital. Every soccer game. The agents monitored potential threats around you, and whenever they updated me. I saw her. His voice broke completely. She lost her front tooth, Rachel. I saw it in a grainy photo from across a parking lot. Tears spilled down Rachel's face before she realized she was crying. He had been gone. And somehow still there. Close enough to see. Too far to touch. Daniel stepped forward, trembling. I hated myself every single day. Rachel looked at him, really looked at him. The sleepless eyes. The gaunt face. The man who had traded his own life for theirs. Then she asked the only question left. Why now? Daniel exhaled shakily. Because it ended yesterday. The arrests had happened the night before. Federal raids. Phones seized. Accounts frozen. Executives taken in cuffs. The ring was over. The danger was gone. Rachel should have felt relief. Instead, she felt grief for 3 stolen years neither of them could ever get back. Daniel's eyes met hers. I came here first because I didn't know if you'd ever forgive me. Rachel's throat tightened. The truth sat between them, ugly and impossible. Not a happy answer. Not a clean one. But real. And sometimes real is the only kind of closure grief ever gets. The drive home was silent. Rachel drove. Daniel followed behind in a dark sedan provided by the federal agent still stationed near the woods. The world outside the windshield looked painfully normal. Street lights. Gas stations. Teenagers crossing intersections with backpacks. A couple arguing in the parking lot of a diner. Ordinary life. Rachel hated how life stayed ordinary while people's worlds split apart. Her hand stayed tight on the steering wheel the entire drive. Not because she was afraid Daniel would disappear again. Because she wasn't sure what came next. How do you bring someone back into a life that learned how to survive without them? How do you explain 3 missing years to a child who stopped asking questions because the answers hurt too much? By the time they pulled into Melissa's driveway, Rachel's heart was pounding harder than it had at the lake. This part scared her more. Emma. Daniel stepped out of the sedan slowly. For the first time since Rachel had seen him, fear was written all over his face. Not fear of criminals. Not fear of agents. Fear of his daughter. What if she hates me? He asked. Rachel looked at him. She won't. But even she didn't know if that was true. Melissa opened the front door before they reached it. Her eyes went wide. She looked from Rachel to Daniel and physically grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. Is that? Rachel nodded once. Melissa's hand flew to her mouth. Then came the sound of footsteps. Emma. She appeared at the top of the hallway in pink socks and oversized pajamas, halfway through asking if Mom was staying for dinner. Then she saw him. Everything stopped. The hallway. The breathing. Time itself. Daniel didn't move. He just stood there, tears already in his eyes. Emma stared. Her face searched his like she was comparing memory to reality. 3 years is a lifetime for a child. People change. Voices fade. Faces blur. Rachel held her breath. Then Emma whispered it. Daddy. Daniel broke. He dropped to his knees right there in the entryway. And Emma ran. Not hesitantly. Not confused. She ran like every bedtime prayer she'd ever whispered had just stepped through the front door. The sound Daniel made when she crashed into him was half sob, half shattered laughter. He wrapped both arms around her and held on like he was afraid the universe might take her back. I'm sorry, he kept whispering into her hair. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Emma clung to him with the fierce desperation only children know. I knew you didn't forget Tuesday. Rachel turned away, tears spilling freely now. That line destroyed her. Because in Emma's mind, Tuesday had never stopped belonging to him. The weeks after Daniel returned were not easy. That's the truth people never tell. Love doesn't erase damage. It gives you a reason to work through it. There were therapy sessions. Hard conversations after midnight. Long silences at dinner when no one knew how to act normal. Emma asked questions every day. Where did you sleep? Did you miss my birthday? Did you really see my soccer game? Daniel answered every single one. Honestly. Even when it broke him. Rachel had her own questions too. Some came out as anger. Some as tears. Some as cold distance she couldn't help. Trust rebuilds slowly. In inches. In small acts. Daniel started making Emma breakfast every morning. Walking her to the bus stop. Helping with math homework he was rusty at. He started fixing things around the house that had stayed broken too long. The porch hinge. The leaking sink. The loose cabinet door Rachel kept meaning to repair. Tiny repairs. Physical proof that he was staying. Rachel noticed he still woke up from nightmares. Some nights he sat at the kitchen table at 3 a.m. just staring into darkness. Those were the nights she'd quietly sit beside him. No words. Just presence. Sometimes healing starts there. Not in forgiveness. In simply refusing to leave. Months later, on the first truly peaceful Tuesday, Daniel walked through the front door holding a paper bag. Tacos. Rachel looked up from the table and laughed through tears. Emma groaned dramatically. Please tell me you remembered the hot sauce this time. Daniel grinned. Never again. And for the first time in years, Tuesday didn't feel haunted. It felt like home. People think the hardest part of losing someone is the moment they disappear. It isn't. The hardest part is what comes after. The empty chair at dinner. The birthdays marked by silence. The sound of a car in the driveway that never turns into footsteps at the door. It's the way ordinary days become cursed. For Rachel, Tuesday had become more than a day. It became a wound. A repeating reminder that life can split in half without asking permission. Before Daniel vanished, Tuesdays meant tacos, laughter, Emma spilling soda on the table, and Rachel pretending to be annoyed when Daniel brought the wrong hot sauce. After he vanished, Tuesday became the day the universe stopped making sense. And yet somehow, it was also the day hope came back. Not because the pain disappeared. It didn't. 3 years left scars no reunion could erase. Emma still had moments where she panicked if Daniel was 10 minutes late from work. Rachel still sometimes woke in the middle of the night and reached across the bed just to make sure he was really there. Daniel still carried the guilt of every missed birthday, every bedtime story, every scraped knee he never got to kiss better. Some losses never fully leave. They just change shape. But healing has a strange way of arriving in small rituals. A dinner table. A familiar laugh. A paper bag of tacos set gently on the counter. A father asking his daughter about school like he never stopped caring. Tuesday slowly became theirs again. Not because it forgot the pain. Because it survived it. And years later, Rachel would sometimes think about that phone call. The static. The breathing. The soft click of a phone unlocking after 3 years of silence. One tiny sound. That was all it took to bring a dead story back to life. Maybe that's what makes disappearance so haunting. It teaches you that closure is never as clean as people want it to be. Sometimes the truth is ugly. Sometimes it's complicated. Sometimes it hurts worse than the mystery. But mystery leaves wounds open. Truth, even painful truth, gives them edges. And every once in a while, when the house is quiet and Emma is asleep upstairs and Tuesday night dishes are drying by the sink, Rachel catches Daniel staring at his phone a little too long. Like part of him still expects it to ring. Like some shadows from those 3 years still live in the spaces silence touches. Because survival doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning how to keep living with what almost destroyed you. So here's the question that lingers. If the person you loved most vanished on a normal Tuesday, and 3 years later their phone suddenly turned back on, would you answer? And if the truth waiting on the other end could shatter everything you rebuilt, would you still want to know? Because sometimes the people who disappear aren't running from the people they love. Sometimes they vanish because loving them is exactly what made them leave. And sometimes, if life is kinder than usual, the call comes back. The light turns on. The door opens. And Tuesday finally comes home. But here's the part Rachel never told anyone. 3 months after Daniel came home, his phone lit up again. Same unknown number. Same static. And this time, it wasn't Daniel on the other end.